you Toastmasters, fellow Toastmasters, and our guest. As Dave or Jim mentioned, I have been studying rewards and incentive programs for years. My wife and I read a book about 8 years ago entitled Published by Rewards, and the thing that caught us, it's a very long book, but the thing that caught our mind the most was one specific example, a research experiment that was conducted by researchers not central to the book, not the author, independent researchers. Now these researchers had decided that they wanted to measure how much they could improve sports performance in non-professional athletes by adding incentives and rewards for points and passes and goals. And so they said, let's choose someone who is rather innocent, so let's choose children. And so they kind of scoured the neighborhood, the area, and they found this park that tended to have children playing soccer on a very regular basis. And as they watched, they could count on those kids about 4 days a week. So then they went there and they worked out everything they had to work out with parents or whatever they had to do. And they just watched the kids. And they started to know which one was which, and they measured which kid scored points, which kid was good at passes, which kid was good at blocking goals. So they had a baseline, because kids didn't know what was going on. Then they said, okay kids, we're just going to do an experiment. From now on, for these things that you do in soccer, like passing, blocking goals, and making goals, we're going to give you rewards in the form of candy at the end of the game. And they saw that every kid across the board, their performance shot up. It was way better. And they were like, wow, look at these percentages. It's so amazing. And so they ended the experiment. The kids had a few days of candy, and the researchers went back to their work, tabulated their data, and they swung by that park one day and there was no kids. And they swung by another day, no kids. And they started watching. Kids didn't play soccer anymore. So my main point here is that extrinsic motivators kill intrinsic desire to do things. Now this is pervasive in our society. I don't have time in 5 to 7 minutes to detail how grades can be extrinsic motivators to children, good and bad. How salespeople who are paid on commission have an extrinsic motivation for doing their job in the form of money. You can always improve behavior in the short term, but the long term we tend to have the opposite effect. So that means that if I would naturally love selling windows and doors, or telling people about highly efficient windows and doors that are made from the best company in the country, and I do that all the time, and that company notices me on Facebook, and they say, hey, why don't you come be our salesman, and we'll put you on commission, and we'll start selling you to do that, or paying you to do that. The danger is, if I allow that pay now to take over my motivation for telling people about windows, when the pay is removed, I won't want to talk to people about windows. Now that is really reverses how we look at life most of the time. We researched this ourselves. My wife is adamantly opposed to video games. She chose not to marry a guy because he liked video games before I came around. So our oldest son, when he was about 8, he's 14 now, we've always let them have a wide autonomy in their choices of what to spend their money on and their time on. And he said, I want to spend time and money on an Xbox, a video game platform. And we were like, oh my gosh. You know, you could say anything but that. We could talk to you about drugs, but not video games. You know? And I said, we got to let him. And so she instituted this rigid program where he only had a few minutes, and he got to play the video games after doing chores, right? So the video game was the extrinsic motivator to do the chores. So he would never do the chores unless he got video game time. That was one bad thing. And as this progressed, he was trying to say, okay, if I pick up that sock, and I have a minute of video game time. And she hated it because she was always talking about video games. So I said, well, just reward him for playing. And she just felt shriveled inside. She couldn't reward somebody for doing something so wrong. It took her 3 days of grappling with the subject, and then she said, I'm going to try it. So she went to him and said, okay, you get your 20 minutes a day of video game time. what's your high score today on this game? And it was the baseline. And she said, okay, tomorrow, beat that score and we'll go down to the gas station and you can choose anything in one section of the store. So he beat that high score that day. And she told him, this is only going to be for a short time. It's just a thing we're going to do. He loved it. Beat the high score every day, sometimes just by a little bit. Beat that high score, got those candy bars every day, and after 3 or 4 days, it was so revolting to her, she had to quit, because it was violating her principles, right? Within 2 weeks, he came to us and said, I want to sell my Xbox. Sell the games, get rid of it. Because he had bought it himself. And we said, okay, that's great. So in that case, we manipulated him with rewards to get what we wanted, but in the opposite way. Instead of paying him to do something we wanted, we paid him to do something he wanted to do that we didn't want him to do. And how to work out that way. Now, of course, later I have to tell you that we did admit to him, because we've told this story several times. He said, is that what you did to me? And we said, yeah, we did. And we had to own that we manipulated the situation. We promised him we'd never do that again. And that's hard. But in another sense, we look at our jobs, we look at our classrooms, professional and public school or graduate and college times, and our homes. And many times we say, I want to modify behavior. I want this good action to happen. Let's provide this incentive to do so. And you'll get it, short term. But long term, you're killing the desire for that person to be or do those things on their own. So rewards work. They just tend to have the opposite effect that you want long term. Thank you very much.